Black Lives Matter. The matter of black lives. What's the matter with black lives in the United States of America? Yo, it's me, Ted Hayes again, the nation's #1 homeless activist and the nation's, that is, United States of America, #1 civil rights activist. I think I did tell you in the last segment how I consider myself and many others who's growing around the country that though I'm not known by everybody yet, I've been, God has been molding me quietly over here in this little dark corner. And now he's beginning to fade me out into the world so you can get to know me and see what I'm talking about and join this movement to rectify the wound, the racial wound, the wound of division, the wound that Abraham Lincoln said makes the United States a house divided against itself. And yo, Black Lives Matter. Guess what? The reason that the United States is a house divided against itself is because of the matter of black lives. Remember, I told you in the last session that circa 740,000 young, innocent white boys and men and 38,000 blacks died in this nation's greatest war, the nation's greatest conflict. It was a conflict not against another country. It was a conflict against itself. That's what civil war is. Not that war is civil. That's just a term. It means, it has to do with, government entities going against, within its own government against itself. Anyway, we got a civil war. These Americans, white boys in the North, which was the Union, the time when the country was physically divided, and there was the South, which was the Confederacy, the Southern states, and the Southern states are the ones who held slaves, chattel slaves, and the North was the one who did not hold chattel slaves because we'll talk about that later too. They had another way of making money, so I don't think that they were so so righteous in of themselves. But I said that, and history says more people killed each other, Americans, in that war than all the wars put together over us. We are the matter. You see, when this country was founded by the founding fathers in 1876, July 2nd through the 4th, 1876, of the 56, I think it was 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence, quite a number of them, vast majority of them, were actual slaveholders. In fact, Thomas Jefferson, who later became the president of the United States, I think he became the 3rd president of the United States, he is the one who actually wrote down drafted the Declaration of Independence, which is the first law of the new nation called the United States of America. And in it, not only did he complain about why against the British Crown and why the American colonies was going to break away and form their own country, he mentioned slavery. He mentioned chattel slavery. In fact, he said that one of the grievances that the American founding fathers had to make war with the British Crown, English Crown, was that King George, the British, had imposed upon them, the American colonies, the industry or the institution of chattel slavery. And so when that was read by the slave owners of the founding fathers, they were offended by that because that's how they made their living, and it wasn't their fault that they had slaves because many of those guys were born with slaves. For example, George Washington, when he was 11 years old, received his first slave. So children were born into this thing, and this is what their livelihoods, all they knew. I'm not justifying this. I'm just telling you these are the facts of what went down. And these guys are saying, you know what? You Northerners, you have another way of making a living. This is all we have is the agrarian lifestyle. And if you take it from us, we lose out. And so, it became a real issue. Oh, but I want to point out something too, folks, that the vast majority, I would say 98%, if not higher than that, of the Southern population of individuals and families did not own slaves. They did not own slaves. In fact, slavery put a lot of the young white boys and men out of business. This is why a lot of the white folks in the South were very poor people because they had this big industry where all these other people who weren't even from this country, indigenously, were working the fields. Those should have been white people working in the fields and getting paid living wages. That should have been white folks putting on them roofs and building them houses and driving them buggies. And it should have been white young men working in the carpentry. That's who should have been working. But they were denied basic livelihood because certain very wealthy people, typical corporate people, wanted to be greedy at the expense not only of the people whom they held in chattel slavery, but also at the expense of their own children. When I say their children, their own young people, the Southern young people who needed employment, who wanted to get married and have a family and raise children and send their children to college, they were not allowed to do that. And then when the war broke out between the northern states and southern states, when the war broke out, these southern plantation owners sent these young white boys, many of them, to war without shoes, without proper uniforms and equipment. The southern boys were hungry a lot. I'm amazed that the southern boys lasted as long as they did in the conflict. Man, I'm telling you something. The southern slave owners, they loved their slaves, their chattel slaves, more than they loved their white young men and women. Now, when I say love, I'm not saying love like a filial, brotherly love, agape love, or erotic love. I'm talking about love that can love like you love an ice cream cone, a vanilla ice cream cone, a chocolate ice cream cone. That's how they loved the slaves, because slaves meant to them property. Property meant to them money. Money meant to them happiness. And that's why they misread the Declaration of Independence when it says that God has endowed us with certain inalienable rights, and among these rights are life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. And in the beginning, Thomas Jefferson wrote the word property. But the southern plantation owners said, you got to take that word property out of there because that's too direct. You're talking about our property. So make the word happiness. So Thomas Jefferson said, all right, he wrote down happiness. The point is, they care more about their pocketbooks than them young white men who had to go fight their war. And when them young boys went and died for what they believed, not for slavery, them young boys wasn't fighting for slavery. They was fighting for their country. Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Texas, Tennessee. That's what they were fighting for. They weren't fighting for slavery. So that was, and then check this out, y'all. Show you how much these cats love these boys, these white boys. These white boys come home, man, ragged, emaciated, many of them wounded, without arms, legs, eyes, ears, faces blown apart. Some lived that shouldn't have lived. Boys came home mentally distraught, PTSD like a mug. And these cats, I can't even begin to fathom what these boys went through. They came home ragged and barefoot, and guess what, y'all? They couldn't find no work. Why? Well, everything was tore up for one thing. The other was a period called, and we'll talk about this, called the Reconstruction period. That's when all the free slaves was getting jobs and power. And the white boys, naturally, felt put out, understandably so. But you see, the matter of black lives was not just with some police shooting some folks down in the streets. This thing is deeper than what you can imagine. But by the time you finish this series, you will imagine. This is Ted Hayes, homeless activist, civil rights activist, the new spokesvoice, Los Angeles, USA.